Today I'm going to cover three topics. They're all very different, and they're things that I'm interested in that I hope you're interested in. I'm going to begin with Warren Buffett and explain what he's talking about life. My name is Ben Reppond. Welcome to my YouTube broadcast. Today is August 20th, 2024. This first clip is actually a cut of a couple of clips of Warren Buffett. He's speaking to a graduate school, and I don't know if it's Harvard or Wharton or where it is, but it's a prestigious graduate school. And he's talking about the keys to companies being successful. But he also talks about people that they hire, that he hires, and the qualities that they look for. And what he's really inferring is, if you were to have a company, what would you look for in an employee? And you almost get away from business and investing, and you go into life. That's the way I read it. And so I look at this, and he talked about the three qualities they look for in an employee, and I inferred into that, these are the three qualities about being successful in life. And I won't go into them, I'll let him explain it. But I think about investments. I think about the economy, but I also think about life, about what it is to be successful in life. I observe people who are, I observe people who are not, people who accumulate money, people who don't, people who lose it, people who don't lose it, etc. I think about all of that. I observe it, and I'm trying to take all of that in and learn from it. And so when he talks about this is really about life. And that's why I thought I'd share it. So it's not really in the world of investing or in the world of the economy. So take a listen to this, and in there, as he talks about these keys that he looks for in employees, think about them as the three keys to being successful at anything. Take a listen.
You would be better off if when you got out of school here, you got a punch card with 20 punches on it. And every financial decision you made, you used up a punch. You'd get very rich because you'd think through very hard each one. I mean, you went to a cocktail party and somebody talked about a company, you didn't even understand what they did or couldn't pronounce the name, but they'd made some money last week and another one like it. You wouldn't buy it if you only had 20 punches on that card. There's a temptation to dabble, particularly during bull markets. In stocks, it's so easy. It's easier now than ever because you can do it online. Just you click it in and maybe it goes up a point and you get excited about that and you buy another one the next day and so on. You can't make any money over time doing that. But if you had a punch card with only 20 punches, you weren't going to get another one the rest of your life, you would think a long time before every investment decision. And you would make good ones and you'd make big ones. And you probably wouldn't even use all 20 punches in your lifetime, but you wouldn't need to. I was up at Harvard a while back, and a very nice young guy picked me up at the airport, Harvard Business School attendee, and he said, look, I went to undergrad here, and then I worked for X and Y and Z, and now I've come here. And he said, I thought it would really round up my resume perfectly if I went to work now for a big management consulting firm. And I said, well, is that what you want to do? And he said, no, but he said, that's the perfect resume. And I said, well, when are you going to start doing what you like? And he said, well, I'll get to that someday. And I said, well, I said, your plan sounds to me a lot like saving up sex for your old age. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Play one game a little bit with me for just a minute, and then we'll get to your questions. I'd like for the moment to have you, have you pretend I've made you a great offer, and I've told you that you could pick any one of your classmates, and you now know each other probably pretty well after being here for a while. You'd have 24 hours to think it over, and you can pick any one of your classmates, and you get 10% of their earnings for the rest of their lives. And I ask you what goes through your mind in determining which one of those you would pick. you can't pick the one with the richest father. That doesn't count. I mean, you've got to do this on merit. But you probably wouldn't pick the person that gets the highest grades in the class. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting the highest grades in the class, but that isn't going to be the quality that sets apart a big winner from the rest of the pack. Think about who you would pick and why. And I think you'll find when you get through, you'll pick some individual. You've all got the ability. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You've all got the energy. I mean, you've got, the initiative is here. The intelligence is here throughout the class. But some of you are going to be bigger winners than others. And it gets down to a bunch of qualities that, interestingly enough, are self-made. I mean, it's not how tall you are. It's not whether you can kick a football 60 yards. It's not whether you can run the 100-yard dash in 10 seconds. It's not whether you're the best-looking person in the room. It's a whole bunch of qualities that really come out of Ben Franklin or the Boy Scout code or whatever it may be. I mean, it's integrity, it's honesty, it's generosity, it's being willing to do more than your share. It's just all those qualities that are self-selected. And then if you look on the other side of the ledger, because there's always a catch to these, free gifts and genie jokes. So you also have to, and this is the fun part, you also have to sell short one of your classmates and pay 10% of what they do. So who do you think is going to do the worst in the class? This is way more fun. And think about it again. And again, it isn't the person with the lowest grades or anything of the sort. It's the person who just doesn't shape up in the character department. I mean, we look for three things when we hire people. We look for intelligence, we look for initiative or energy, and we look for integrity. And if they don't have the latter, the first two will kill you. Because if you're going to get somebody without integrity, you want them lazy and dumb. I mean, you don't want them smart and energetic. So it's that third quality, but everything about that quality is your choice. You can't change the way you are wired much, but you can change a lot of what you do with that wiring. And it's the habits that you generate now on those qualities, or those negative qualities. I mean, the person who always, claims credit for things they didn't do, that always cuts corners, that you can't count on. I mean, in the end, those are habit patterns. And the time to form the right habits is when you're your age. I mean, it doesn't do me much good to get golf lessons now. If I'd gotten golf lessons when I was your age, I might be a decent golfer. But someone once said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And I see that all the time. I see people with habit patterns that are self-destructive when they're 50 or 60, and they really can't change them. They're imprisoned by that. But you're not imprisoned by anything. So when you write down the qualities of that person that you'd like to buy 10% of, look at that list and ask yourself, is there anything on that list I couldn't do? And the answer is there won't be. And when you look at the person you sell short and you look at those qualities that you don't like, if you see any of those in yourself, egotism, whatever it may be, selfishness, you can get rid of that. I mean, that is not ordained. And if you follow that, and Ben Franklin did this, and my old boss Ben Graham did this at early ages in their young teens. Ben Graham looked around and he said, who do I admire? And he wanted to be admired himself, and he said, why do I admire these other people? And he said, if I admire them for these reasons, maybe other people will admire me if I behave in a similar manner. And he decided what kind of a person he wanted to be.
Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. I sure enjoyed it myself. The next thing I want to do, I want to just shift really big gears here and go over to Federal Reserve rate cuts. Because of the economy and because of the carry trade, the unwinding of the carry trade in Japan, which I covered last week, there is talk about the magnitude of the Federal Reserve rate cut in September, at the September meeting. And maybe it's 25 basis points, maybe it's 50 basis points. At one point it was 25, then it moved up to 50. I don't know where it is now. Maybe it's back down to 25. People are speculating what that's going to be. What's interesting about this is what I call what is bad news is good news, and what is good news is bad news. What I mean by that is that, and we'll get to see in September, I think this will be very revealing, is that if the economy is doing badly and the Federal Reserve wants to stimulate the economy, what they do is cut rates more, okay, to stimulate the economy. That makes sense. So sometimes that is viewed, and it's not consistent, sometimes that is viewed as this is positive because investors perceive that it's going to be a positive stimulus for the economy and perhaps the market. On the other hand, it is also signaling that they believe the economy is in terrible shape if they go for a larger rate cut. And sometimes what that means is the market, the stock market, goes down because it's like, oh, it must be worse than I thought it was. So there is no consistent pattern. But this is an interview done on Yahoo. I thought it was good, and about the upcoming rate cuts and the probability of a 50 versus a 25 basis point rate cut. So take a listen.
All eyes are on September's Fed meeting, everyone. Over 92% of traders, they're expecting a 50 basis point cut at that meeting. After weaker than expected economic data reignited recession fears. To discuss, Yahoo Finance's market domination co-host Josh Lipton is here with us in studio. Hey, Josh.
All right, Brad. So investors now have new questions about the overall health of the U.S. economy following that weak July hiring report we got last week. That sent the stock market tumbling, and the pressure continues into today's trade. All three major averages deep in the red right now. Investors concerned, is the economy just cooling, or are we now facing the possibility of a more serious economic downturn? That debate has heated up about the Fed's role in all of this, of course, with the question being asked, did central bankers wait too long to lower interest rates? Yes, our Fed policymakers suggested they could cut in September, but some economists now think that the Fed should cut by a more aggressive half point rather than a quarter point. As of this morning, markets were pricing in a more than 90% chance that the Fed cuts by 50 basis points by the end of its September meeting. That is up from an 11% chance just the week prior, according to the CME Fed Watch tool. I checked in with Joe Brusuelas, chief economist at RSM. He says the case for a supersized point cut has now been bolstered by the market action we're seeing. If this continues, he says, and we get another flat reading in the CPI and or PCE, the case even for an inter-meeting supersized rate cut, he says, would be on the table. What does all this mean for consumers right now? The yield on the benchmark 10-year is back well below 4%, creating the conditions, Joe says, to support improved lending, home buying, and auto purchases. It also, we know, brings down the cost of purchasing durable goods, things like washing machines and dishwashers. And Joe points out, tends to drive down the cost of variable interest rates on credit cards. But of course, at the same time, we now have a lot of new questions front and center for consumers and investors. Does the stock market keep reeling? Does the labor market go from cooling to cold? The economist Claudia Sahm recently told Yahoo Finance she is, in her words, very concerned that we could tip into a recession, Brad.
Finally, I want to play a piece from Mike Wilson. Now, you know that I'm a fan of Mike Wilson. He's not perfect. Matter of fact, he was wrong in 2023, but he has been right for a long time, and he is viewed as, by his peers, as the best investment manager on Wall Street, which is a pretty high bar. So, anyway, I still respect him, and he's got his reasons for making the predictions that he made in 2023, but his insights are always very good. So this is a piece from Mike Wilson, and on the direction of the market. This is influenced by the direction of interest rates or interest rate cuts, the consumer, and of course the Japanese carry trade. So good insights. Just 2-minute clip that I think will give you Mike Wilson's take on the market. Take a listen.
We thought it would happen in the third quarter, so it just happened immediately, and there's always different reasons for why it happens. Look, our general take on the correction that we've seen is that we're probably going to be stuck in this range now. I mean, we had a pretty big shock. It wasn't just the correction we saw in the equity markets, but then we had the carry trade kind of unwind, And I don't know how people can sit back and feel comfortable with that. The main thing, though, is what you guys have been talking about this morning, right? The consumer is slowing, right? All the consumer services companies in particular, it's not just the goods companies, and that has to be resolved here. So the way we think about it is, in order for markets to kind of make a new high, I mean, you need multiples to expand, and that's going to be very challenging in a world where growth is slowing. Okay, earnings expectations probably are still too high for the second half of this year, and a Fed that's reluctant to be proactive. Okay, and I don't disagree. People are criticizing the Fed. I'm like, well, look, they're just being data dependent. I mean, and so they're doing their job. They're going to react if they need to. If they overreact, then that probably exacerbates the carry trade problem. So they're not going to overreact.
Whether you think you're going to get that 25 or 50 basis point cut over in September, it's still more than a month away.
Right.
So as rates remain elevated, how much more pain does the consumer see? Do you think investors are perhaps underappreciating how much more pain there's left in the
Plus,
consumer?
they're lagged, right? It's not like the Fed cuts at September 18th and the consumer goes to Home Depot and buys a new washing machine on September 19th, right?
Yeah. Well, that's certainly been our view, right? I mean, we've been underweight consumer discretionary and sort of overweight the later cycle groups and then defensives on that premise, meaning we think being defensive right here makes a lot of sense for all the reasons you mentioned. All these things work with a big lag, and I completely agree. In fact, our note this week, we discussed this in detail, particularly housing. Right? 25, 50 basis points isn't going to do anything, mainly because most people's mortgage rates are sub 4, if not sub 3%. So you need 200 to 300 basis points of cuts to really get some of these interest rate sensitive areas moving, and that's just going to continue to weigh on consumer sentiment. It's going to weigh on consumer stocks, and so that's how we're set up. We're set up to be sort of underweight that space.
This is a picture of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I'm sorry I don't remember Warren Buffett's age. I want to say it's about 94. Maybe I'm off by a year or so. Maybe it's 93. Charlie Munger died last year, or earlier this year. He was 99, and that was his partner, his longtime partner in Berkshire Hathaway. And I don't know how many years, maybe 60, 70 years they were together. And they were kind of like frick and frack. I mean, they were just opposites. And, kind of Charlie Munger, I think, is the straight man, and, the punchline would come from Warren Buffett. And it always seemed like it was funny, but they were opposites. And they would, I heard this interview where Warren Buffett, I forget, one of them was talking about the idea, maybe Charlie Munger, like, okay, Warren would come into my office and he would say, okay, I've got this idea, I've got this company. And Charlie was a very cautious, more so than Warren Buffett, guy. And Charlie would say something like, well, the answer is no, so what's the question? So he would, he'd be kind of the naysayer. And, Warren Buffett's not going to jump on any investment out there. He's very cautious. But Charlie Munger was even more so. It reminded me of this, and pardon the personal reference here, but in my decades of experience of running companies in Seattle, I had one in particular, my primary company. I had a partner, and he and I were very close. And it reminded me of that, where he and I were close, and our offices were right next to each other. And I would go in and run ideas by him. Okay, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And just a great counterbalance, kind of like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. And eventually we sold the company and moved on. But sometimes there are those situations where you have partners or senior management where people kind of counterbalance each other. And that's what they did. And it was a good memory for me of thinking about how that worked for me. And it all worked out well. We started 2 companies, sold both of them to public companies. And again, I think it worked out well. I always appreciated the difference that we had, of how different we were, and our personal lives were quite different, but in business it was a nice counterbalance. And I saw that over the years when Charlie Munger was alive and how they worked so well together. Okay, thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below.